Ooh, things are running slow today. This should be fun. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our client care program office hours for this month. I'm going to go ahead and give it a minute since it looks like we're having a little bit of a hiccup with some of the lobby and folks joining. Um, so give us one moment. We'll get started. Thanks. Okay, I think all of the dinging has completed and folks will be able to enter our session here. So we'll go ahead and get started. We are 3 after the hour. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us on this client care program office hours. This topic today will be covering the RC Care system, and we have some special guests. I'll jump into that real quick next, but just wanted to say thanks for joining us and grab your coffee and cookies and hang tight. We're going to have some fun. All right, so here we go. We are special guests. We have Pascal and Kara from our RC Care product team that will be here to discuss RC Care, which should be pretty interesting, and some things that are coming and kind of what they do, some behind the scenes information that they've got for us. And then we also have Ariane that will be here discussing a few topics with us today. I know in our overview, we said we would be talking about an SRT product. Unfortunately, that was not released into the system, but we do hope that that will be coming soon. And as soon as that does, we will share that. But we have some other wonderful information right here for you. We have some client care program updates and some reminders that we're going to be discussing first, getting those off the table. And then, like I mentioned, we've got our RC Care product team to talk about RC Care. We're going to talk about RC Care user roles, our usual information around knowledge articles and RC Care support, and we have saved time at the end for questions. So please hang on to those, and I'm going to mention how we'll talk about that. We are here in a Microsoft Teams meeting. It is scheduled for 90 minutes, and we will be here for the full 90 minutes. Attendees, you can enable your auto captioning in the Teams meeting, should you like. And presenters, if you are able to use your camera, we do ask that you do that during the presentation while you're presenting or speaking. All of your lines are muted, and you're in listen-only mode. There are 2 ways to ask questions. We have our Q&A feature up in the top of your Teams meeting. You might see 2 little bubbles with a question mark. We will take those questions at the end. Please go ahead as you have them, put them into that Q&A bubble in your team settings, in your team meetings, and we will try to answer those as we go, or we will answer them at the end. Sometimes, on occasion, we have seen where some folks don't have that Q&A button in their Teams meeting. So at the end, we use Mentimeter, and we share a code that we can have your questions entered through. So hang on to those, write them down so you don't forget them, and I will share the code and QR code so that you can ask your questions at the end of this session. We do ask that you enter your name and region. We like to know who we're talking to. So it feels like a conversation. We are recording, and we will be posting this to our Client Care Programs Office Hours YouTube page. That playlist will be shared as well. Soon after the event, we will share that recording and a link to that recording. If you are watching the recording, you can click at the top of your screen for a Client Care Program overview given by Jack Herman, should you like to watch that. That is also in our office hours playlist. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. Housekeeping is done. We will get started with our Client Care Program update. So I'm going to hand this over to Chris Davis.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me okay?
Affirmative.
All right, cool. Now we're going to try the camera. Are we good?
Voila.
Aha, yes. Had some tech issues earlier, so I was kind of holding my breath there for a second. All right, cool. So howdy y'all. Going to talk about some client care program updates. One of them we have been talking about for some time, but as a reminder, all active RC Care users must have the training that is required for their user role in RC Care. That has to be done. So any missing training has to be done by March 31st of this year. So that's coming up quick. If that is not done, then users who have not completed that training required for the user role that they currently hold will have their RC Care access deactivated. So please note that that is coming up quick. All of the RC Care user access training can be found by user role in curricula. So if you have your user role, you can type what your user role is in RC Care. So for example, compliance reviewer, since I'm on the compliance side of the house, will pull up a curriculum that has all of the classes that you need to have for your user role. So it's much easier to get a hold of all of the classes right there in Edge without having to search for other documentation. We also have a new knowledge article that talks about how to find the curricula in Edge and kind of a little bit more background about this process. So that is coming up quick. So all you RC Care users, please make sure you have the training that is required for your user role or your access will be removed. We also have a doctrine bulletin coming up here pretty quick. We don't exactly know when it is going to be published, but we anticipate that it will be quite soon. It is going to be covering some common compliance and confirmations issues. We will be clarifying some things around client data privacy and document handling. We're also clarifying some ID and address confirmation processes and some other compliance procedures. So very excited that that's coming out. We will be able to have some of that information in doctrine bulletin format just as quickly as we humanly can. So just know that is on the horizon. We've had lots of questions. We've had some confusion about some of these things. And so we're taking this opportunity to make sure that the guidance is very, very clearly spelled out in that way. So cool. That's what I've got, Allison.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate those updates. All right, let's go ahead and listen and hear from our product team. I'm going to advance. I'm not sure who is Pascal. Kara, it's all yours.
I'm Karen Averio. I lead our digital product team that manages RC Care and also Skya, which are our shelter client information app. I'll share a little bit about myself before we dive in and also give Pascal a chance to introduce himself. I've been with the Red Cross a little over 10 years. I started as a volunteer duty officer in Chicago. I also spent some time in the former National Capital Region as the senior DPM before I joined the RC Care product team. So really excited and grateful to have the opportunity to be here with you all today. And I'd like to give Pascal a chance to introduce himself too. Pascal?
Thanks, Kara. Hi, everyone. So I am Pascal Masuba, and I am an associate product manager working closely with Kara. I've been with the Red Cross like a little over a year, 1 year, 4 months to be precise. But definitely, I think it feels 5 years already. Really loving it so far, and so super excited to be here to get to know you guys a little bit more over time. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Kara.
Thanks, Pascal. Allison, are you advancing the slides? Thank you. Okay, so I want to start by introducing what is the RC Care product team. We are part of a department called the Humanitarian Services Business Systems Integration Team, which is essentially our digital product management unit that supports humanitarian services. And our focus is enabling mission with digital capabilities. Next slide, please. And you can advance to one more click. Thank you. So let me explain a little bit. What is a product team? What do we mean by that? So our RC Care product team works as a unified team, unified cross-functional team. So we have product managers and service designers that work with our volunteers and with our program teams to understand what problems need to be solved and what outcomes we're trying to achieve, and then think about how we might address those with technology. And then we partner with our engineering team to design and develop and deliver that technology. So for RC Care, we have a dedicated internal team of solution architects, developers, QA test engineers, and we work side by side with them every day. So that's a little bit about what we mean by a product team. If we go to the next slide, please. RC Care is just one of our product teams within Humanitarian Services. We have others that are focused on supporting our other digital applications. So for example, there's a product team that supports Volunteer Connection and RC View, as well as others. And these are our high-level priorities when we think about digital capability and experience within Humanitarian Services. So these are the strategic priorities that we are focusing on. The first is improving our workforce's digital experience. So hopefully making it simpler and easier for you all to do the mission work that you do every day. We're also building new capabilities to support mission delivery and adaptation, especially in our disaster context and our posture of continuous response. In light of the climate crisis, we're building a lot of new capabilities as we digitally transform our business. We also focus on all of the kind of wonky behind the scenes stuff that it takes to maintain a healthy digital product and make sure that the technology that we're using is resilient at scale, especially as we are seeing increasing scale and volume of operational service delivery within DCS. We're paying attention at the individual line of code level to make sure the way that we're implementing technology is scalable to support our future. We also work on how we can derive insights from our data and looking across our portfolio of opportunities to learn from the data that we have. We work with our Humanitarian Services business partners to identify opportunities for digital innovations, doing new things in a new way. And we also spend a lot of energy on continuing to learn and develop as a team. So especially in our disaster context and in the digital technology space, there's a lot of disruption, right? Lot to keep pace with. So we think of ourselves not as a know-it-all team, but as a learn-it-all team. So that's something that our team really focuses and prioritizes. Next slide, please. And you can click to show the bullets, please. Yeah, thank you. So I want to share a little bit about how we do the work that we do. We use human-centered design methods. And what that means is really that while we're trying to solve problems that produce business outcomes, we are also doing it with a very focused lens on the end user experience for our volunteers, our staff, our clients that are interacting with our digital applications. So we are very intentional about understanding that individual human perspective and experience with our technology. Next slide. One of the first places that we start when we're trying to figure out, trying to get our arms around a problem or a possible opportunity to solve for is we start with research to understand the problem and the current experience. So this is an example of a research artifact that the RC Care product team produced, looking at the experience of an intake worker and what their journey is as an intake worker through delivering, capturing intaking a client into RC Care and delivering immediate assistance or any of those other initial services on scene. So the journey maps focused on the experience of that end user throughout that end-to-end process. We also research and produce things like a service blueprint that looks at not only that individual user's experience, but how they're interacting with other users, with the backend supporting processes or policies that inform kind of what that digital flow looks like, and the underpinning technology. So we always start with research to make sure that we're grounding in a real understanding and not just guessing about what's happening or what the pain points might be. Next slide. And then last slide here about how we work. It is not a linear process, which I imagine everybody here on the call works in our disaster mission space, which you also know is not a linear process, right? So we're starting sometimes with some information, we learn a little bit more, maybe we think we have an idea about how we're going to solve the problem, but when we try that out, we realize we learned something else new, or we realize it didn't quite work and we need to iterate and try something different. So we work in that same nonlinear way, especially to help support the ambiguity and drive for continuous improvement of our disaster mission. So that's a little bit about our RC Care product team and our humanitarian services business systems integration department and how we work. And now I'm going to turn it over to Pascal, who's going to share some examples of some of the big projects that we're working on right now. Pascal?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kara. So I guess maybe to start with, you all know the intake process, you know the intake form. So I think as a team, we've done a lot of work and we continue to do a lot of work around the intake process. So one major thing that the team is really working on is really the big initiative draft intake, which for this draft intake initiative, I think we've really been focusing on like one, workforce simplification to improve volunteer and client experience, because we know how critical the volunteer experience is. So much work has been done around ensuring that we kind of really take a holistic look at the intake process and see what are some of the current recurring pain points and how we can really tackle and resolve some of these. So we've really put on so much effort in ensuring that clients are able to save and resume draft during the intake process, and also enhancing the universal navigation. So wherever you are on the intake form, you should be able to get access to certain functionalities, certain core functionalities. Also thinking about like flexible intake steps. I know with the current intake, it's like you have to complete step 1 to go to step 2, but we are listening and decoupling those components a little bit more so that when you start intake, you can scroll to the other steps and come back. But then at certain point, I think you would need to complete all the steps before having that into like an actual case. So what that looks like, I think it's something which we, in terms of like that development, it's still in development. And so I'll just speak on some of these high buckets on like what we're working on, but hopefully in future we can really dive deep into how those core functionalities look like. We're also doing a lot of work on simplifying the user interface, because I know just looking at the EV tickets, there have been a lot of complaints on like some of the user experience. And so we're looking to really simplify that effort to make sure that people don't spend that much time with, to make sure that some of the questions are very clear on what to do. Some of the functionalities are clear on what is expected to be input into those text boxes. We're doing a lot of work around that component. Also, I think we are doing extensive work on reducing duplicate data entry and confirmation. So really making sure that the intake form is really streamlined, simple as possible, and just like assuming the position of a user and going through that intake form in a very simpler form. Another aspect that we've also been working on is really enabling intake flexibility for mission agility. So that would be more around more easily add new services, making the intake form in a way that it's easy to like add on services, whether financial or non-financial, and also enabling program or event pilots or unique needs so that, for example, if there's a certain step that need to be added, we don't have to like rethink the entire intake process again. It can easily be a program or service can easily be added, additional steps can easily be added and removed as and when necessary. So really enhancing that flexibility a little bit more. And then finally, really making the intake form simpler, more resilient, technical architecture, so that at least that will make the application easier to update and maintain in the future. Because we know, like in terms of like bugs and some of the error messages, just making sure that the system is simpler so that users know what each functionality serves for, and they can definitely minimize some of the error messages that are currently produced. Next slide, please. And so another initiative, I think the AppSecure product team recently completed a major project in June to improve the digital experience of our clients impacted by disasters. So with our payment partner, GAIACT, which is now called LSEG, so we refreshed our payment site for all clients who received financial assistance via electronic transfer form. So the work that we did there in terms of like refreshing the site, it involved like simpler for clients to read. We made sure that we simplified text so that it's easier for clients to read, understand, and choose their best payment options. So for these components, I think we rewrote the entire text to help clients quickly and easily understand the information that is really presented. So most of that text edit was done using a trauma-informed approach, where we kind of really ensured that most of the text were really plain language, like in the very simplest form that any user coming in would kind of really understand what we're trying to ask, and to simplify really complex content, because we know part of the intake, especially with the payments, some of these terminologies are very complex. So kind of really breaking it down to the very simpler form. So this reduced really the reading grade level from grade 9 to 12, which was the case before. It reduced it right down to grade 6 or lower. So it's way simpler, and I think the user kind of really understands a little bit more easier what they're really expected to do. Also on that page, I think we made it easier to use, to be more accessible, right? So we updated the user interfaces, we improved usability, accessibility, and use of phone or tablet. So no matter the media that you're using to access this page, we want to make sure that the experience is enhanced for multiple platforms. And so with that work, we used the AppSecure design library to apply consistent, high-quality UI design elements. And I guess just maybe emphasizing, when we say trauma-informed, we're really emphasizing that we want to reduce the cognitive load, because our clients are really stressed, right? And so we want to make sure these texts are really simplified in a way that there's no cognitive burden on the client. We want to reduce the grade level to like grade 4 or 6, grade 6 or below as much as possible. And we also just want to make sure we have like concise, shorter content that is really easier to find and understand. Avoid jargons, eliminate it to the extent possible, but really emphasizing that it's really simple as possible, using active words for clarity, and also applying to online and physical touch point, and really thinking of like enhancing the experience, both for digital platforms and also for physical touch points, like thinking of the user journey as a whole holistically. So this was a situation. I would show you the before and the after page. Next slide, please. So this was the before example of the client payment site. And you can imagine if you're in a disaster relief effort, it's a lot. It's a lot to process. It's a lot to take in. So after all what I had spoken about, can you please move to the next slide to see the after? And this is the impact of, this is the result of, after all that work, all the text simplified. This is very easy for the user to see what they're supposed to do, in very simple terms, and to take action. So, so this is just one example of the work that we have done to make sure at least we reduce that cognitive load on the client. We're also working on a project now to apply this approach, what we've learned, to all of the email and SMS messaging that we send out to clients. So, so much in the pipeline, but I think we're excited. As Kara said, we're learning as we go, and it's a learn it all attitude, not know it all. So really truly appreciate all your support in the journey. Next slide. And I think Kara, I'll hand it over to Kara.
Thanks very much, Pascal. So in addition to some of the big strategic priorities that Pascal just shared some examples of, we also work very closely with disaster cycle services to respond to emergent operational needs. So as we know, each disaster is a little bit unique in its own way and presents its own problems. So this is an example of some work that we did this year, this past hurricane season. As many of you probably know, and some of you may have worked this response or even been personally impacted. Hurricane Helene struck in late September, impacting across 10 states from the Gulf Coast to North Carolina, which posed a really significant new challenge for us as an organization on how we were going to respond. So the problem that we came to was, how can we efficiently reach over 20,000 families whose homes were destroyed or had major damage, and are likely eligible for our recovery financial assistance. That's just a huge number of people across a vast and difficult terrain. So we needed to be creative and think about new ways that we could make our services available to people more quickly. So the RC Care team partnered with DCS very quickly in a matter of a couple of weeks to put together a new process that we piloted for Helene that allowed clients to register online to indicate if they were interested and believed that they would qualify for recovery financial assistance. This was allowed us to reach many more people more quickly. It also reduced the burden on the number of responders that had to deploy physically to the operation. We extended the pilot also to Milton, given Hurricane Milton, given the overlapping impact there. And then we have continued to use this new pilot process on a number of new DROs over the last few months. So actually, when we, at the beginning of January, when the wildfires in LA broke out, we were able to use this process, get it up and running very quickly within 1 week from the beginning of the fires, which allowed us to launch our immediate assistance, financial assistance program, the fastest that we have ever done for a level 5 or above operation. So for a DRO of that size, trying out this new process allowed us to provide immediate assistance much faster than we've ever been able to do. Still a lot more for us to learn and improve here. And so that's a very intentional part of our process, as I shared earlier, doing that intentional research and evaluation, and making some intentional informed design decisions as we go forward. But this is an example of how we have best laid plans of our strategic roadmap, but also are very responsive to those emergent operational needs. If you go to the next slide, I just wanted to share, as we wrap up here, share a little bit more behind the scenes, give you a sense of a few other folks on the team here that are working to support you and RC Care. So these are some pictures of some of our team who did a site visit a little over a month ago to support long-term recovery bridge assistance delivery for Hurricane Helene in the Asheville area. So we had product managers, a service designer, our tech lead, our program manager, and one of our QA test engineers went out to participate in mission delivery for our clients, and also to really observe and learn to better understand what the experience is like for our clients and for our volunteers, and have been able to bring that back and incorporate that learning and experience into their work. So we really appreciate every opportunity that we have to be there side by side with you in the field, and helps us do better work to support you when we're back at home behind the screens. So thank you again for the opportunity to join you today and for giving us some time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Allison, I'll turn it back over to you. Thanks.
Thank you both very, very much. Really appreciate you having you here, and the questions that are coming in. I hope you can stick around to help us answer at the end. All right, so let me go ahead and jump forward here to our RC Care user roles, and I believe this is Ariane.
It is I. Okay. So I want to cover a few things on user roles. We haven't done a review on this in a while, and we got some really good feedback on just confusion or needing clarification on the user roles in RC Care. So I'm going to spend some time talking about all the regional user roles in RC Care, and I will hopefully do a good stab at it. So first, talking about the functional roles that do primarily casework style, and that is, the first one's going to be the intake trainee. This is an optional role. No one has to go into the intake trainee. This is an opportunity to give users that have not completed their training the ability to be a second responder for viewing the ID and address documents confirming damage. Once training is completed, we have the intake worker. This is the standard role for those that do DAT responses. And they can create cases, and they can be a second responder on cases. The next level up of some more access, this gives access to the console. So intake has like the intake portal. Sometimes we call it the community portal. But the casework is our console. And they can still create cases, they can still be a second responder on cases, but they also have the ability to do follow-up on a couple of services, primarily the recovery services, and if they deploy for SRT, which is shelter resident transition, they can be assigned to do follow-up casework on that service as well. And within both of them, they can provide financial assistance. For recovery, it would be supplemental assistance, and for SRT, it's the SRT financial assistance. The next user role we have in RC Care is the IDC worker. So again, we're kind of compounding on what's already been talked about. They can create cases, they can be a second responder, they can do their IDC program of health, mental health, or spiritual care. They can do follow-up on recovery and provide supplemental assistance. That is if they are also a caseworker. I do want to state, since we are kind of compounding and giving more duties as the responsibilities go up on these user roles, they don't have to do all of these. This is just what the system would allow. So for example, if a worker, an IDC worker, wants to also do casework, Since you can't have two roles in RC Care, we would tell the user to get an IDC worker user role so that they can do both, for example. For the casework supervisor intake, again, they can create cases, they can be a second responder, they can do follow-up for recovery, they can do follow-up for SRT if they're deployed as shelter resident transition. They can do approvals that are needed for RDO and DRO exceptions. This will be for supplemental assistance, IDC assistance, and SRT. And they can also help with payment resolution. So again, these user roles are very focused on the day-to-day. We're creating cases and we're doing our follow-up in whichever program that we needed. The bulk of our users are going to fall within these categories. Allison, if you'll go to the next slide. This is where we get into the more technical piece. We call this case management. These roles fall within the function of managing cases, not so much doing follow-up. So again, all of these user roles, we cannot have a user with more than one user role. We're all assigned one user role. And these do not do any case creations or follow-up of any kind. Again, they're managing pieces of a case, and we have to have separation of duties, which we'll talk about on the next slide. So the user roles within the region that we have that kind of fall within this category, the first one is the account authorizer. This is a required role for regions to have. You'd be in a tough place without this because this is the user role that's going to request and approve user roles for production and create sandbox accounts. They're also going to complete the user reviews that are required within RC Care now to sign off that training has been completed. They are going to review it and say that you have the training for a supervisor intake, you may have this role, and they will get you that access. They'll also be modifying accounts, deactivating accounts. They are responsible for user roles within your region. The next user role is the case administrator. This is technically an optional role for regions, highly, highly encouraged to have. They can help speed up the process when things are stuck in certain things that need to be changed in order to make compliant for, not compliant's not the right word, but to be changed to pay out financial assistance. So they can do override of contact update requests. These are minor changes, typos. They can make clients payment eligible. So if they were added after intake, they can go in and make them payment eligible, and they can remove household members. Very common things that happen on a day-to-day basis. This user role is pretty active on work that's needed. Next, we have the compliance reviewer. So they're going to be analyzing trends. They're going to be reviewing cases based off of their dashboard that get flagged for a compliance review. So if we're using any individuals as verifying ID or address, a compliance reviewer is going to be looking at the case to ensure that we have the appropriate information to make the case compliant. So a needed role within the region. The next required role is the RDO exception approver. This user role can also override minor contact update requests. So again, typos, significant requests are going to go through a document upload process, and they can do the approvals for an RDO exception for supplemental and for IDC. So if we want to provide more assistance outside of the program scope for supplemental or IDC, what our standard payments are, is that it's going to go to an RDO exception approver to review it and approve it within their region financial controls. The next two are kind of either or, but strongly recommended. It is a required role within the region of having an ID address document reviewer, or they can hold the role of supervisor document reviewer. Both of these roles are going to be reviewing documents that come in to make a client eligible for additional financial assistance. If the ID isn't fully confirmed and they've uploaded a driver's license, they're going to be the ones looking at it to make sure that the client's ID can get confirmed to pay additional money after the fact. A supervisor document reviewer can also do payment resolution, so it is an ideal role to have. Event reviewers are also a required role. I've said that word too many times. They will review a case that does not have their event confirmed, and they will work to get that case confirmed in RC Care by calling to verify, looking for media to verify the event. Again, this will also block payment resolution, paying additional financial assistance if a case does not have an event confirmed. There's a lot of technicalities that I don't want to go through. I just want to kind of show what each user role does. But if we have questions in the Q&A, I can answer them if there's specific ones. The last two, so we have the regional event administrator. This is also a required role. This is where you're going to have creating events, merging events, and event modifications that are needed. An event that you're going to respond to for DAT that's over 14 days. You're going to be the REA, the regional event administrator, is going to be involved in that. If we need to override damage assessment because minor was picked and you needed uninhabitable, they're going to be the one that does that action to change it. And they can also do case region sharing or reassignment. The last one is a read-only access. It's called Monitor. This is good for those that need to run reports. So it's an optional role. No one technically needs to have it. It's good for fundraisers, executive directors, anyone that wants to look at reports and say, hey, here's how we're doing, is they can have that role in RC Care. I'm sure I'm missing something, but Allison, let's go to the next slide. So it's some additional resources on user roles. On OneSource, we have the Client Care Program, Financial Controls, Standards and Procedures. This explains some of the reasons for why we have the separation of duties. We are bound legally to have, for audit and finance purposes of us issuing money, we do have to have some separations. And it talks about the functional areas. So what role, user role falls within what functional area, who's responsible for it, and so forth. We do have two knowledge articles in RC Care that you can access. One is, what are the user roles in RC Care? So that just bullet points of each user role and who does what. It's a really good article for those that maybe don't manage other people, or maybe you don't need to know all the user roles, but it's good if you want to access it to say who does what exactly. The other one is System Actions by User. So this is, it's not all inclusive. This is like the big ticket items of who does what by user role. So if you forget, you know, who can update, you know, does the client accept financial assistance? You can open up this document and it's going to tell you these 5 user roles. One of them happens to be the intake worker. So if they accidentally select no, they have the ability to change that with their access of an intake worker. One other thing I want to mention is that if you can't fill a required role, it's not the end of the world. You should strongly be looking to have them filled, but it's a great opportunity to do cross-region or cross-division support, is working within your division to identify where gaps are. It's also a great way to do bench depth, is that if say, for example, an event reviewer or a case admin, maybe they're not as busy and they'd like to be more busy. One of the challenges with those case management roles is that they cannot do casework, they cannot do DAT. And a lot of our workforce does do one of those two things. So how do we find enough people to fill all of these required roles and stay busy enough within their select job duties of that user role within RC Care? And so it's a great opportunity to work with regions and within your division to create teams. You could have bench depth that they can get access to all regions needed in order to assist in work and perhaps be a little busier or take time off or deploy, and you guys are not in a hardship of losing that user role. Allison, I'll go to the next one. Thank you. Talking about Sandbox, these questions come up a lot, so I wanted to spend some time to talk about this. So first off, what is the sandbox? It kind of goes by a couple different names. It just depends on where you learn about it. They may call it the training sandbox or just the sandbox or the RC Care sandbox. Basically what it is it's a training environment that will allow you to practice RC Care actions. You can click around, give fake money on fake cases, don't put any real data into it because people can access it. But it allows you to mess around, to try and break the system. You practice to your heart's content, and you're in a safe environment. That is the training sandbox. It is not required to be used. You don't have to maintain an account. We will say that if you don't log in at least once every 60 days, the account will automatically go inactive. A lot of users may do hands-on within production where they're being mentored on an active case and they're clicking through it, and that's perfectly fine. But the sandbox is that safe space that if you want to practice on your own, create a case, all of that can be done in the sandbox. No training is required for the sandbox. We do hear a lot of myths go around on the sandbox, so trying to myth bust. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Users can hold any user role in the sandbox. You don't have to have training, it's not required, but if you, for example, train IDC workers, but you don't have IDC access in prod for whatever reason, you can get the IDC worker access in the sandbox to help troubleshoot, walk them through the process in that safe environment of that play area. For new DAT workers, highly recommend they immediately start with intake worker. Even if they're intake trainee in production, they don't have their training completed, they can get their intake worker in the sandbox and they can immediately start practicing opening up cases. So that way they're getting a leg up as they're working through their training, and then they just have to change their production access when the time is right. Last thing I want to bring up on the sandbox access is how do I get sandbox access? You can reach out to your supervisor, or if you have connections with the regional account authorizer, it varies within region, is that you can request that access to get. Remember, you will have to log in every 60 days in order to keep it active for as long as you want it to be active. You can also submit an IT ticket. Because no training is required, a regional account authorizer does not have to approve you getting sandbox access. So you can submit an IT ticket for the sandbox, or your supervisor can as well. Allison, we'll go to the next one. Okay.
Oh, looky there, you're all set.
Yep.
Thanks, Ariane. All right, folks, we are going to jump into our very quick knowledge article conversation. These are slides that we offer on every single one of our office hours. So if you've been to one of our office hours before, these likely will look familiar. We will go through them very quickly. Knowledge articles. We have a number of them in RC Care, and they are essentially digitized guidance. We've pulled a lot of our RC Care step-by-step processes and put them into the system that you're using. So if you have a question as you're going through some of the processes within RC Care, something you're doing and you have a question, just do a search for a keyword or something and see if there's a knowledge article written on how to issue assistance or something of that nature. There should be a knowledge article that is in the system for you. We are constantly publishing and writing new ones, updating any of our current knowledge articles as well. I mentioned a topic. They are divided into topics and categories. So hopefully making it a little easier to browse and find what is interesting or something that you may need. They are kind of our first line of defense, since they are right there for you in the system, and always there for you before you jump into our next user support, which we'll get to here after these slides. We've got two different article types. We have frequently asked questions, where you'll see an article that has a question and an answer attached to it with perhaps some steps or a link to another knowledge article that'll help in there. And then we also have procedural, so step-by-step how to complete a task. They have purposes and then steps 1, 2, 3, 4, with some screenshots included as well. So you should be able to follow them that way. We have knowledge articles for knowledge articles. We have a couple knowledge articles here that will tell you how to access some of the topics that we have. And then I know I mentioned some of these articles have graphics. There are times that the graphics don't load. So all you see is a little broken picture. There is a knowledge article on how to get those images to reload. So you should get all of these links when this presentation is shared, or go right into RC Care and search for the article name or the article number, and you should be able to find them and check them out. All right, I mentioned our user support. Here is our laundry list of user support channels. So while our knowledge articles are your first line of defense, they also go hand in hand with your supervisor, who is also your first go-to person with any questions that you may have, as they can then point you in any direction that you may need. They might send you to the intake hotline, or perhaps to an RC Care application lead. We also have, we already talked about knowledge articles, our IT end user support. That's for some of the account questions if you're having trouble logging in. Or I know some folks too with the multi-factor authentication. If you need to have that recalibrated, the IT user support is your place to go. Technical exceptions that are monitored throughout the week, 7 days a week, from 10 to 6. We are monitoring those if there are some exceptions that need to be made on cases. One example is if a non-resident primary client designation was marked by accident, you need to submit a technical exception to have that removed. Our report help folks, those people, I tell you, are just fantastic. If you have a question about reports or need help building a report, go ahead and send them an email and they'll help walk you through create a report for you, answer any questions that you have around the report help. I'd be remiss if I walked right over that client care help. That is our daily inbox. If you have any program questions that you need help with, go ahead and answer that. We are monitoring that during the week. So we'll help you answer those or point you in the right direction as well. Our client care page on OneSource, and then the embedded feedback tool within RC Care. So many different ways to get a hold of us, but we do encourage you to try and reach out in your region first to see if those answers can be completed or answered for you there. All right, that is enough. We need to leave some time for Q&A. As I mentioned at the top of our program here, 2 ways to do questions, and I can see several of you are already taking advantage of the Q&A bubbles at the top of your teams. There's an image here. Please go ahead and continue to enter your questions there. We do also utilize Menti for those of you that don't have the Q&A feature. So if you go to menti.com, that's MENTI.com, and enter the code 59329688, that will get you into our Menti questionnaire, and you can type in your questions there. We also have gotten fancy. We have a QR code, right? And I'll leave this page up on our screen. Go ahead and screenshot that or take a picture, however you get your QR codes, and that will bring you to the Menti page for us as well and ask those questions. We'll be moderating both areas. All right, let me go ahead and take a deep breath real quick because there are some questions in here. Let me go ahead and answer this one that just came in. While Ariane gets ready, I'm sure to take one of these questions and answers because I could see she came on camera. Will we be sending the slides? Yes, we'll send the slides and we will send the link to our it is recorded session up on our YouTube playlist. All right. Ariane, do you have one that you want to answer? I see you hanging out.
There's a lot.
There are a lot. So
you guys are doing great. There
is one specifically that if you want me to run it, I see your name, and it's about the user roles.
Okay.
Is there any need for a DAT supervisor to have a user role other than the intake worker? Did you see that one?
That was a good one.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. So no. unless you need access to things in the console. So if within your region, you have DAT supervisors that help with payment resolution, maybe they will complete the full training of a supervisor intake worker in RC Care to help support with some of the payment resolution aspects of RC Care. But if a DAT supervisor does not do things, does not need access to the console, then they should just stick to intake worker of creating cases and being second responders. They don't need to increase their access. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Can't even get to the bottom.
There was a question on do we plan on changing the payment security questions? Jamie, did you want to tackle where we are on that?
Yeah, and I think I published 2 of them. So we cannot actually control them. Those are controlled by GIACT, by the EFT vendor. We have provided our feedback on them. I think many people have said, I agree. I think it's a little wrong to ask people to do math in order to verify who they are, but we are not in control of those questions. So we've continued to provide feedback, but that is the best that we can do about them.
Thanks, Jamie. There was another one on here about using the sandbox and providing the financial assistance going through the process of a CAC or an EFT. You should be able to issue EFTs and CACs. You just use a dummy number. I think you have to use 9 digits in order to do the fake money through the sandbox. I will also state, because we get a lot of questions about how often is the sandbox updated. The sandbox is updated approximately like 1 to 2 days after every release that we have. Right now we're doing releases every 3 weeks or so. So if you see something wrong in the sandbox, please let us know. We're happy to look into it and to address it if something did go wrong in the system, but it should reflect what you see in production. And you should be able to issue fake money, essentially. Is that it may look real, but it's not. And it will also give you, if you use your phone number, for example, and you use like text message as the preferred communication type, you can see what the client will receive for the EFT, for the document upload links, all that you can see from the perspective of a client if you do it through the sandbox.
There's a question that actually was published as a reply to the very first question. So we might not see it, but I just happened upon it, so I didn't want to say it. How do you access knowledge articles in RC Care? There's actually a knowledge article on that, but you can find them just by searching in the search bar in RC Care. And then on the left-hand side of your screen, if knowledge articles do not appear, you can just go down to where it says knowledge, click that, and the knowledge articles will start appearing. RC Care uses a smart search. So if you only ever search for cases, it's always going to give you cases as your first option. Once you start searching for knowledge articles more, it will start giving them more. So if everyone has access to it, you can search. I had to search for some while we were in this call. I just searched regional event admin, and a good 10 of them just appeared for me. So you don't even have to know the exact title or the topics or keywords or anything.
Yep. There were questions on here. Sorry, Allison, I'm jumping in. I see another one, but for modifying your user role in the sandbox or reactivating, I saw 2 questions on that. All that is needed is an IT ticket to modify your sandbox RC Care account. So you would just modify it to IDC worker, or you would just, I think it's modify to reactivate, but I'd have to double check, Allison, if you know off the top of your head. But it would just be an IT ticket to have your account reopened. And that, again, that can be done through your supervisor, can be done through the REA, can be done by yourself through the IT portal.
The IT ticket has a checkbox that is reactivate.
Okay.
Yep. And make sure you check the box for the sandbox, not the production.
And I believe for the sandbox, it's automated, right? So it should happen. If it's
Yes.
filled out correctly, it would happen right away. Sorry, just reading through.
I think related to, yeah, there's a lot that's covered. There's, you know, a lot that's
Yeah.
coming related to the sandbox. You can have only one access at a time. So, or one account at a time. I see somebody has intake access, but also needs console. So you would need to have your account switched to a different role in order to have that console access.
Yep, and perfectly acceptable. Again, you don't have to have the training. So if you want to be a caseworker in the sandbox, so that you can then do intake and casework and see it, you're more than welcome to. You can have the IDC access and you can do all three if you want. It just depends on what you feel you need for training or for playing around or supporting. That's the access that you want to get in the sandbox.
I was typing this answer, but I'm just gonna just speak it out loud a little bit. There was a question about when the client registers online for services, where does that go? And I believe that this comment was referring to, I think Kara talked about it, about the QR code form. And I think some people have commented about how it was really helpful on how in recent disasters, we have the online form that clients can go and register. That information all comes back to the client care team. Chris Davis and her team of speedy little data people review it all, check it for about 1,012 things. We compare it against damage. And if we find that we've already have a DA pin for that, we just go ahead and then invite that person using our standard accelerated outreach process, which if you've been on large scale DROs, you might be more familiar with. But if you haven't, if you're a local regional DAP person, you probably are not familiar with accelerated outreach. But that's where we send an invitation to a client via SMS, email, and phone. We give them a call and tell them that they might be eligible and they should fill out an application with the call center. So people fill out the form. If they qualify, if we know that they have damage at their address, we send them an invitation. If we don't have damage for their address, DA will review it, decide if they need to do hot shots. And if, and then we determine they do have damage, we send them an invitation. If someone fills out the form and we have non-qualifying damage for them, we will send them a note to let them know that they do not qualify for financial assistance, but we may, send them resources, referrals. It kind of depends on what the DRO is doing. But that's how all that information gets processed. It all happens up at the NHQ level. And we share that visibility with the DRO.
Let's see.
I've got Steve Dixon who is asking a question about the language. Language changes, are they now active with intake forms? I think we've always had them, right?
You can change the intake language from English to Spanish. Those are the only two languages that we have navigation switches for. Pascal, I see you're still on, so I'm going to ask you a quick question. Do we have even a very, very rough estimate of when of the draft intake process? Even if maybe it's like an estimate of when it might be ready to go live or when we might be even ready to demo it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think at this moment, there's no definite timeline to communicate to everyone. I would say currently, I think we are aiming that by the end of the team is really working towards finalizing the prototype right now. And so once that's complete, then the remaining developments we'll be able to estimate that, but it's kind of really hard to estimate when that will be complete. But I think our goal is really targeting at least next fiscal year. Yeah.
Thank you. I saw a couple of questions on that, so I just figured I'd ask that and then I'll get those questions.
Chris, I'm going to punt one to you if you're still around.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so we have a question of, we still have some IDC workers who want to know why they cannot have more than one role at a time. For example, doing the DAT call, then they want to be the caseworker for the case. Can you explain any separation of duties of being able to work, you know, different roles on a case, if that makes sense?
It does. And, you know, one of the things that I would throw out there is that I would ask, you know, what is it that they're trying to do as a caseworker that they cannot do with the IDC user role, and make sure that they're using the IDC user role to its full potential. Because I think a lot of our users have found that, like, oh gosh, I really can do most of this casework stuff. Which does alleviate the vast majority of those problems. In terms of, you know, why can we only have one user role? It really comes down to having system enforcement on our separation of duties. You know, and we talk about separation of duties as in the financial controls, and keeping folks separate in terms of the money is absolutely critical, but we also have to think about keeping folks separate in terms of the data. And, you know, Brad talks a lot about data as a service. And when we talk about client data privacy and client data protection, and we can't have people just sort of moving in and out of user roles. We kind of need to know exactly where they are with a defined kind of set of things they have access to. Now, as an IDC user, you can do all kinds of stuff. And so first I would suggest going back and really exploring kind of the boundaries of that IDC user role, because I think you might be surprised.
Thank you, Chris. I also have a similar question on the, for new duty officers that are not doing DAT intake, would they be able to get monitor access to use RC Care that helps determining who already has been helped with IA? Chris, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Yes, absolutely. So glad I talked about client data privacy and things like that. So to get the monitor role, you know, we really want you to have client care program overview done, as well as be current on your data privacy and, oh, keep me honest, I'm losing it. It's the data privacy and security awareness trainings. Sorry, I've lost it for a second. And we are getting those other two, we're going to be getting those built into the curricula soon. So, you know, yes, you could have access to that. However, a lot of that information can be found also in RC Respond. And, you know, I would say go there first, but if you need it, monitor access is an option.
I would also tag on, you also like to say that a lot of duty officers that do not do DAT intake sometimes get the role of event reviewer, since they're already reviewing events, that's a really good engagement opportunity to use them as event reviewers.
True facts.
Mm-hmm. There was another question on here, not related. I'm changing topics here on, is there a video or training for new users to show them how to maneuver in RC Care, the nuts and bolts, how to toggle between intake and the console, how to assign a case to yourself, and how to look up cases, etc. There We do have videos that we did demo a lot of this. They might be slightly outdated, a year or two old of, it's on our YouTube channel for the client care program. We have recovery and intake. I don't know if we have one on how to toggle between the two, but you're just going to the 9 dots, the waffle from the console side. And then there's an intake. It's like the first drop down. You click that and it takes you directly into the intake portal. We tell people to, especially if you're practicing or playing around, to just go to the console and then transition yourself back to the intake through those 9 dots in the top left-hand corner. But we can, if we don't have a knowledge article on it, I think that would be a good opportunity. We can put something together. Chris, I'm going to punt this one to you. Speaking of data privacy and security, is it acceptable to use WhatsApp by caseworkers to share questions and information regarding client issues?
Can we tell if we're talking about 2 clients or to each other?
Let's say to like speak to a client through the WhatsApp.
Okay. So talking to a client through WhatsApp, no, you should use RC Care to text and email with clients. That way, their for one thing, their responses are all in the same place, and we can, your region can report on those and can be able to, if you're in there and you're doing really good follow-up and things like that, having that communication all in one place like lets us kind of capture that good work that is being done. It also lets continuity of care happen. So if a caseworker needs to go on vacation or is sick or something like that, lets somebody else kind of pick up where somebody left off and just continue the conversation sort of basically in the same thread for the client. So the client doesn't experience it in different ways. It also keeps us from having client information on our personal devices, which we should never have. If we are communicating any personally identifiable information at all, it needs to be encrypted and it needs to be in protected Red Cross systems. And if you have questions on how to encrypt, in our weekly updates now 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was a how to encrypt little note on there. So if you get those weekly updates, there are instructions there for both the web app and desktop versions of Outlook. So just keep your communication with clients through RC Care. If you are needing to communicate with another caseworker about a client, leave it in Red Cross systems and make sure you are following encryption policies to make sure that PII is protected, because some of those messaging those messaging systems are not nearly as protected as what all of us would really like to hope that they are.
Thank you, Chris. Next question I have is related to the supervisor roles. We have 2 different ones. We have a supervisor intake and we have a supervisor document reviewer. Supervisor document reviewer, I can't speak anymore, went through some changes in the last month, 2 months, where they lost some permissions that they used to do in RC Care related to triggering payments and a few other specific fields for like changing them that you would typically do as a supervisor supporting caseworkers. Their role is has transitioned under the compliance team. They're more focused on the document review and having that higher level of access than an ID address document reviewer has. The follow-up caseworkers that are in a supervisor role are encouraged to transition to the supervisor intake role so that they don't lose anything that they've previously been working on. But the difference is that a supervisor intake worker, they can do more resolving payments They can trigger financial assistance. So they can give supplemental assistance. They can request an RDO exception. They can approve the supervisor RDO exception for supplemental and IDC. The supervisor document reviewer cannot do that because that would trigger new money, and we don't want them doing that with their role. Chris, is there anything else you'd like to add on the supervisor document reviewer that I didn't cover?
Yes, one thing that on larger DROs, if you are interested in deploying with our team, like Ariane said, casework supervisor document reviewers are part of the centralized kind of compliance and case review team that we have that work across DROs. If you are interested in deployment for ID address document reviewer, you really need to have the training done for casework supervisor doc review, because that is the role for that particular setting that we need our document reviewers to have. So just throwing that out there, since we kind of started talking about training and updates and things, and as we're separating those roles out a little bit more, that is something to be aware of.
I'm gonna also send another one your way. Is there, and if so, what is the required training in RC Care for an intake trainee? Do you know off the top of your head?
I do actually, because I had a fantastic conversation with Emily Aloto about this, and she was quite firm in that in order to obtain the intake trainee user role, you must have the training complete for the DAT specialist gap. So she was very firm that since our regional programs partners are primarily the folks who are using that intake trainee role, they have set the bar so that you must have the full gap training done for the DAT specialist before you get the intake trainee role.
Thank you. All right. For those that didn't catch, but Allison did put the link to our Client Care Office Hours YouTube channel playlist in the Q&A. So if you need that link, that's where all these recordings, I believe, go, as well as our previous ones for the office hours, client care, RC Care. They all fall in there. I'm just reading through some right now. Does anyone else see any burning ones we should answer?
I'm gonna say this one, Chris. I feel like you're gonna have some thoughts on it. If event review and ID address review is done, first responder damage and ID address confirmation are done, then the second responder approval for confirmation of damage, ID and address is optional or mandatory. And so I think this question is, I'm gonna make some assumptions about this question. That if the ID and address confirmations are fully done, like maybe the first responder did their My Actions and then the intake worker or the client uploaded documents and those were approved by a document reviewer, then it is fully okay that the second responder did not do their approvals. You might want to discuss with them why they didn't do them, and put the onus on the client to upload documents for a single family fire. But what matters is that the confirmations are completed. But I also wanted to say this question out loud because for our general DAT responses, you don't need full confirmations to provide immediate assistance. Just because we don't need the full confirmations to provide immediate assistance doesn't mean we shouldn't aim to get them. And so I think that that's what this question was trying to ask and say, like, if the first responder does it and it's provisionally confirmed, is it okay if the second responder never goes in and does their approvals? And so Chris, I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yes, I agree. So, you know, like Jamie said, we do allow provision of immediate assistance on our smaller events with provisional confirmation. So if there's not that second confirmation on a case that has just IA, and in fact that's strictly system controlled, so you won't have anything other than IA on those cases. It is not going to be a programmatic compliance problem. Now, if we see that popping up lots and lots and lots, then that becomes maybe a trend problem and we raise an eyebrow and go, what's going on here? Like, is it capacity? Is somebody not going into my actions or what have you? For full confirmation, if the event's confirmed, if ID address is confirmed, we don't have on smaller events, we don't have a preference on how we got there. Now, I mentioned at the beginning, we have some updates coming out. One of the things that will be involved in those updates is we are going to be gradually kind of directing more and more on large DROs folks toward document upload. The fraud risks associated with large events are different than smaller events. And we want to make sure that we are protecting our clients' data and identities and only providing funds to the actual clients instead of impersonators or other types of threat actors. So, but yes, if the system has allowed you to do all the things from a compliance standpoint, on smaller events, you are okay. Just know that on larger events, there's some clarifying stuff coming in this upcoming doctrine bulletin.
I see there's a question about the ability for DAT supervisors, managers, coordinators to be able to run reports, like seeing who has access to the system. If your user role, and that's the thing about saying DAT supervisors, managers, coordinators, is that doesn't necessarily correlate one-to-one to a RC Care role. But if your RC Care role can run a report, then you can run the report to see who has access to the system. There's also already existing reports that anyone who has access to the system should be able to view. So I'm not fully sure about if there's additional details to that question that I'm just missing, but anyone should be able to access the user reports that are already created. A lot of the RAAs use them to see, to help them manage the people that have access.
I'll take another one. I think we have a few minutes left. So if a second responder doesn't do their approvals, the client can't get any further assistance besides IA. They can't do health, mental health, spiritual care, etc. That is true in part. If GIACT does confirm the ID and address, and an event reviewer reviews it, and that makes the event confirmed, that they would qualify for financial assistance. It's also the same thing if a client uploads a document before the second responder does their confirmations through My Actions. we could theoretically get the approvals needed done in order to open up additional financial assistance. Our easiest way to get confirmations done is to have 2 responders do their confirmations on intake. That way the client's not being asked to upload documents. We're not waiting for document approvals. It's a good best practice to have. There's also some misunderstandings about when a client can get financial assistance based off of like confirmations. To get IDC financial assistance, all that needs to be confirmed is the ID and the event. It doesn't have to have qualifying damage, and the address doesn't have to be confirmed. For supplemental assistance, it needs all of them. It needs qualifying damage, ID and address confirmed, and the event confirmed. And also the event has to be eligible for supplemental assistance. So they're all slightly different based off of what's required. You'll know what is needed if you get to the financial assistance screen of your program you're working on, and it tells you we still need ID or we still need the event confirmed. It's not going to let you pay until those are confirmed. So if you're unsure, the slide for financial assistance on that will tell you what's needed. Anyone else have any other questions we should address?
I know Katie has been monitoring Menti, and we've either answered them or they are not related to the topics here. Running through them again.
There's a question on here about automatic notifications for when a case is escalated. One of our challenges is we don't know who it would go to because we don't have the system's not necessarily built to know like who's on call, or do we need to have a group of people that get an email notification each time. So the escalation of email notifications of incoming things is a very difficult thing if not one person is assigned to it to make it work in the system. So right now there's no planned work to try and build that in. Let's see. There's another question on, is it possible to add a good goodbye script to the end of the RC Care intake to help improve like the client satisfaction? Right now there isn't. There is better language overall for the draft intake of what it's going to look to give a better experience system-wise. But we can pass that feedback along.
Yeah, Ariane, I'm here.
Oh,
I think
okay.
we'll prototype in something along those lines of like, hey, thanks for the intake, something really fun. So yeah, it's in the, we'll prototype in something. Thank you.
Thanks, Pascal. Okay, Allison, I think I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Ariane. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, everybody, for all of the questions. We have reached the bottom of the hour. It has been a wonderful office hours. Thank you so much for taking the time taking time out of your day to hang out with us and listen to our RC Care workshop this month. We are working on our April RC Care office hours, or our client care office hours, and we'll get that out in the next couple of days. So you have that information. If there are any questions that we did not answer, please feel free to send us your question at the clientcarehelp@redcross.org. That is our program inbox, if you remember from our user support chart. So please feel free to email us there and we will answer your question through that inbox. And again, just thank you for the time, and we will see you again real soon. Keep an eye out for the email for the recording and the slide deck. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.